Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to this week's episode of The Global Guys. Today, we're joined by Liz, and we're going to be talking about the future of retail. So Liz, would you like to tell us about yourself and the company you work for?
Hi, well, thank you very much for allowing me to join you today. I'm an independent HR and business change consultant. I operate under my company as Cross HR Limited, and I work across a broad spectrum of services and sort of ways of working, but chiefly three areas where I operate as an interim HR director and chief people officer, and that's either bridging key temporary gaps or helping existing HR teams and leaders to drive big transformational projects of change. The second part is an area that's probably more so at the moment, where I'm an advisor and a coach to leaders in HR, business transformation, organisational change. And I also provide HR mentoring and bridge HR services. So I do a lot of work at the moment mentoring HR leaders of the future, as well as just sort of bridging the gap where you might have an HR leader or an HR manager running the HR operation for organisations, not represented at a board level, but needs some extra help and support strategically, or indeed their boss, their CEO might want that injection from time to time into their businesses. So it's sort of those three areas. Recently, earlier this year, I sort of finished a big gig over 2 years with McArthurGlen, which is Europe's largest designer outlet operation, and 5 billion turnover, not value, so not Vista, but they are the biggest across Europe and within the UK, and that was a big transformational sort of program, as well as putting in Workday and changing the HR operational model along that as well. So that was really great fun.
Wow, yeah, I bet it was, yeah, absolutely, especially for working for someone that large as well. So Liz, how have you found the retail industry has changed in the last 10 years?
I think in so many ways. I think
the list is never ending.
Yeah, it is, and I think partly that's also because the retail industry is the second largest industry in the UK. And often, with many other countries as well. And I think it's a very agile industry. It's one that doesn't sort of stand still for too long. And so I think is a leader in how it's sort of transforming. But I think there's a few sort of key areas. I think in retailing, the way it looks at customer and product has evolved massively over the last 10 years. And I think we've swung from 10 years ago, where it was all about product and it was all about product just selling itself, and that was essentially the customer experience with a little bit of what did you want to be the brand that sits around that, and identity. I think now that has really swung, and certainly the last sort of 10 weeks have really accelerated it even more into customer experience. And I think from a retail perspective, and if I even think about my last couple of years with McArthurGlen, really looking at sort of where, as consumers, we were shopping and on a mission to achieve a particular shop, or go and see a product, or go and see a shop and experience it. But it's literally now much more of a broader experience, where we might want to have a food experience with an event experience, as well as the shopping, the product experience. So it's a much broader proposition. And I think underneath that, and the reason I sort of probably started with that, is that that's driven then a number of other opportunities and changes. I think that we have then seen alongside that the onset of the digital revolution, which again, the accelerator pedal's really on that at the moment now because of the pandemic. But that has been consistently, and not slowly, but I think steadily becoming more important in the way everybody does business and in the way retail does business. But that has changed operating models dramatically, and so in terms of HR and organisation and people, that is sort of then seeing an evolution in terms of organisation structures, operating models. And I think to sort of conclude it, probably more recently, and again, particularly over the last 10 weeks, but this has been coming for some time, we've seen, in particular over the last 3 years, I think a shift in the way businesses are operating and in ways of working. And so we're sort of seeing the role of digital systems and process that sits behind how we all work and what's needed, and a massive injection of investment into that area. Almost if you weren't invested into that area, you were in danger of, you weren't on the train and the train was left the station. So I think we're seeing a big transformation in that area as well. Again, the project I've just finished, we were putting in Workday as the HR sort of system and the finance of a system solution. And that in turn really, really fundamentally shifts the operating model for HR teams, but also the way in which you engage, manage work, and the opportunity from that, and train and develop people as well. So I think those are probably big key things from a commercial perspective. I think behind that, there are a number of other things that are coming to the fore. We've seen also the government, putting much more emphasis on diversity. Governments across the world starting to introduce more reporting and more compliance in that area, which I think is also weaving its way into the whole talent arena and the importance of talent within businesses, where 10 years ago HR and talent and that agenda would be in the big players, might be in some others, wasn't necessarily prevalent in the SMEs. And I think that's sort of really seeing quite a big shift as well over the last 10 years.
Yeah, and I guess with everything that's happened in the last 10 weeks plus, it's more important now for your shop window and your shop and your brand to be strong, so people go in, because if you can't have many people in there, you can't try stuff on. There needs to be a real draw, doesn't there, to draw people into that store or into that brand, to be able to want to see it and to have that experience.
Yes, and I think, and it's interesting that you're kind of you're focusing on the store, because of course retail now is a much more multi-channel model of wholesale store experience, the digital experience, the delivery, other events as well. With Joules, we had, actually about sort of 6 or 7 different sales channels in which we were bringing product in different ways to the business when I was within Joules sort of some years ago. And I think most retailers, now have really had to broaden their proposition. And it's interesting that you talk about, experience of trying on and so on. And I think that the store and the physical store is having to evolve, and will have to now more rapidly evolve even further in terms of what does that experience represent, because we're restricted. But also, what does the experience represent to blend it successfully with our appetite as consumers to buy online and deliver or have click and collect. And so again, the store and the physical retail is also becoming much more of the showroom alongside the more experiential experience to grab our attention and to make it worth us getting out of our armchairs to come and shop. And we may not even walk out with product. We may also walk in and make some choices, but actually then have that product delivered to our homes or to our cars and so on. So it's changing the way we shop and our habits as well.
Yeah, I was reading about ASOS during lockdown, obviously right at the beginning having some challenges, and then from what I read, they had a really, really strong couple of months afterwards, so much so that they're repaying the government back for anyone that had been furloughed. And sounds like that side of retail is still very, very strong.
I think whenever you have a situation like this, and I'm slightly old enough to remember other sort of recessions, but also other dramatic events that have affected the world of business and work. And I think, there are always winners and losers out of it. And you will find that, and I think that's where as a country we're very we are very good after the shock of actually adapting to what needs to change to adapt and to continue to be relevant to the future. And I think ASOS obviously were one of the first sort of big players to bring online shopping to us, and then built the relationships with all the retail organisations about 15 years ago, and so they're adapting. Next have adapted, and again some of the people that were getting initial difficult press, partly because of also the ways of working and the worry about warehouse operations and so on. I think they're coming out, they've worked out how to do it, they've adapted, we've got used to the change, and we're on the change curve, and so therefore we're all adapting as well. But I think and people are having to certainly sort of focus on that.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. You mentioned that, and also referring back to what you said about sort of you need to get on the train now, and it's left the station, because that adaptation and that the digital side of things has to be strong. And with Mark saying, do you feel that over obviously the last 6 months, that has probably been like the top agenda for the retail industry from a digital side of things, but also just to adapt of how the world is moving, probably try and squeeze 2-3 years worth of planning into 6 months?
Strategically, yes.
Yeah.
I think and certainly evident through some of the relationships that I have and and people I've been talking to over this period, then absolutely, if you've been strong in that area, that has been your area where everything's had to be almost sort of entirely switched. And so, people operationally have had to sort of switch to, meet the demands in that area. If you're not strong in that area, then I think businesses are having to really sit up and, think about how do they become stronger. It's a real challenge, and I remember that I was at a Retail Week conference years ago, and actually the quote was, if you don't get on the train, you're going to get left behind. And I think you could see that half the room believed on that and half the room were really cynical about it, and had some serious discussions, because it consumed millions of pounds of investment. It's a very expensive strategy to shift to. It's a revolution, and so it's a big challenge for organisations to get onto that train, because of the cost of systems and digital solutions. But you can't afford not to be on it. And I think, and right now, the challenge is that the economic picture is really difficult. So of course you're in that sort of catch-22 right now. But I think the people that do come through will be the people that have successfully not switched altogether, but have built that area and can blend it with an overall, different sort of experience as we go forward in the new normal. I think the other piece underneath that will also be how they successfully adapt the organisation structure and ways of working and the skills in organisations to meet that demand. Because digital skills we're still not totally mature and established in terms of having those skills in plenty, across the world and in this country. It's a very competitive world. It has been for the last 10 years. It's suddenly we've pressed the foot to the metal over the last sort of 5 months, and so suddenly that's a whole area in demand, and so that's not going to be just met by people going out and recruiting and looking for people externally. I think over the next 10 years, and quickly as well, and more quickly than that, we've also got to invest into, the whole infrastructure of education and development and skills. Both businesses are going to have to do that, and schools and education are going to have to do that to meet that switch, to meet that revolution, to meet that shift in what organisations need to look like, and the skills we need at board level right through to, you know, sort of entry level to cope. You know, and I was talking to a great ex-colleague of mine who now runs her own small retail organisation. She hadn't got an online part. She hadn't got her web set up yet. She's quite new in. And she went, blimey, you know, I had to shut my shop. So I've quickly had to adapt and build this sort of website. But, you know, she's had to adapt. She's done it. You know, she's done it on her own. She's not, you know, a web expert by any means. But she's, you know, found the right advice, and she's had to adapt in that way. And I think that's, you know, on a tiny scale, that's what somebody at an individual level's had to do. On a big, you know, global scale, that's what we're all having to do by really, really shifting. And we've got to find a way of redeploying, because we can't just say, well, you know, you're defunct on skills, you don't have the skills now, so you go and I'll bring in. It's got to be a blended way of how we recast and evolve our organisation structures and our skill bases.
Yeah, and that kind of led into what I was about to ask as to what you thought the future held for retail on like a couple of different levels, really. Like obviously the digital side, you know, is the shop dead, or is it going to change, do you think, for the future? And also, like, you're talking about the organisational structure and stuff. Are the days of people having 1,000 people for whichever company in an office, you know, HR department in the same office, finance in the same office, all these people in the same office, is that going to change as well? Like, where do you see the future of retail as a whole going?
Yeah. Well, I think on the first bit about sort of, you know, what will retail look like in the future, and I'm not a guru in that sense, but certainly
I'll hold you to this.
But, you know, from my experience, you know, is there a role that physical retail still has to play in the future? Absolutely. Absolutely. We're human, you know, we're human beings. We are not individuals that like to be just stuck at home for everything. We want to go out. We want to, you know, we want to have a really great experience when we go out. And so I think absolutely there is a role for physical retail in the future. But I think that we will see that continuing, in my opinion, to be a far more blended experience, both in terms of what the retailer is offering, but I think there's a big, very important role that town planning has to play also in this as we go forward, because we, you know, obviously we hear a lot of comments about the death of the high street and so on. I don't think it needs to be the death of the high street. I hope it's not. But the high street, which, you know, and town planning comes into the sort of centre of that, needs to evolve rapidly to think about what, you know, what are high streets of the future, and how can they successfully accommodate different ways of operating retail, hospitality, eventing, services, offices, and working as well. And I think, and I hope, that I think there's a huge opportunity for us to be much more creative in how we look at these sort of spaces going forward, which I think is really exciting, but I think it will really, really force town planning to also go through a real revolution in how it looks at space. I think to your second question about sort of ways of working and the office, and, you know, is the office dead? I don't think the office is dead. It's an interesting subject that's quite close to my heart at the moment, because through this period also, I'm also a member of the All Together group that offers advice pro bono and mentoring to businesses. But I've also been doing sort of pro bono coaching and counselling and support to people that contact me who are either in work or out of work. And in particular, quite a lot of millennial sort of age groups of people I've worked with over the last sort of few weeks and months to just help and support them. And I've sort of found for every individual that's saying, I don't want to come into the office anymore, I want to work at home, and I know you've sort of previously talked about this, and so you know, that's going to be really important. But for every person that I've sort of heard that from or read, I think there is also quietly, and probably more quietly, there are people that have really suffered from working from home. They've suffered mental health. You know, two individuals that you know, I've been helping recently, you know, went into clinical depression through this period, both working, one furloughed, one not, but both really, really suffered as a result of suddenly losing that physical community and that sort of interchange, and also the ability to get their job done, because suddenly life turned to, you know, death by Zoom. You know, but you know, they were losing that ability for quick decisions, learning. Not everybody learns well doing everything digital, and they really, really needed the contact of their sort of colleagues, and also the leadership and the direction. So I think it's been kind of interesting for me, because I think there is another side to how we then cater for different people with different needs, and sometimes at different stages of their own lives. That means that home working is more attractive. Other people, it's absolutely not. And I think also for leaders, we have to look at, you know, how do we successfully lead with a very multi-generational workforce that's also going to be quite diverse in how it's working and its way of working. And so that will be a combination of people that do need an office. I think it will be a combination of evolving the office into how it sort of, I think, engenders a community feel, and how it becomes a hub for people to have meetings come in. You know, and for some people, they will be in that office more. For other people, it will be about, you know, coming in occasionally for key meetings, for key updates, maybe for training and development if that can't be, you know, achieved online or more remotely. So I think that the office space, I don't think it's the death of the office space, but I do think that, again, you know, the office planners, and I know a lot of people in that sort of industry, they are really, really working very creatively and more creatively in terms of what does that sort of look like as a hub. And I think the third aspect to that is that when you've got a more dynamic workforce, it requires development of leadership in a different way. You know, how do we develop our leaders of the future and for now to help cope and drive that? It requires a sharper way in which we manage and set goals and are clearer in strategies and manage to outputs, and that we, you know, manage the performance successfully of individuals when they're working in a more divergent way. And it will also require us to probably put into place extra lifestyle measures to support the lifestyles and health and well-being of people that are working in a more dynamic way. It's quite complex. I think it'll be more complex, but
yeah, definitely. Liz, thanks for that. That was brilliant, and also, you know, testament to you to be offering that as an additional service. You know, it's surprising, like you said, with regards to working from home, you know, how people are reacting, and you know, and like you said, as much as doing this sort of interaction is okay to a certain degree, you know, I for one can turn around and say that I miss it massively, the interaction with individuals. It's you know, it's what drives me, you know, and massively. So I can really obviously understand that massively. So those are the serious questions with regards to the future of retail. So as per usual on the Global Guys, we like to do a couple of fun questions to wrap up. So first one from me, and then Mark will do one. What profession other than your own would you like to attempt, or would you have liked to have attempted?
If I hadn't been in HR, it was two other alternatives.
Okay.
Vet.
Okay.
I love animals. At some point in the future, I'm hoping to become a trustee of an animal organisation. I'd love to do that. But I deselected sort of vet, because actually in order to be qualified as a vet, you have to be even more qualified than a doctor. So it was sort of that was a big no-no. I wasn't going to go into university for years and years. And the second one was to, don't cringe, but I wanted to really be a real estate sort of estate agent. I love property. My other passion is that my husband and I, we love property. We like doing it up where we go and sort of choose to live at different points with our family. And then we've also got some property in France. So for me, I think if suddenly everything was cancelled on HR, I would probably try to become an estate agent.
Wow.
I'd love to do it.
When I look to buy my house, then I'll come for you some advice.
Absolutely.
That's absolutely fine.
Yeah, and the vets, I've heard that before about the vet being more qualified than the doctor. I think if you love animals as well, the thing that would put me off being a vet, apart from the educational side, is the bad side of it. I'm sure the good side's really good and fun and nice. Horrible. Anyway, not to dwell on anything horrible. I'll wrap up with one final question that sort of ties back to the show. So, as you know, we call ourselves the Global Guys, and every week we ask the guests who their favourite global guy is. So this can be anyone. We've had so many different people come up with different answers, from Attenborough, Bolt, Beckham, Trump, Obama. We've had
you.
Mine is, at the moment, I think the woman of the moment for me is Michelle Obama. I really do wish she would run for politics, but equally I think she strikes me, I don't know her, but she strikes me as a very kind individual. I think she could really, really lead the charge in a number of areas. Without having to be, in direct politics. But I really, when Barack Obama got into office, I just felt that was just such a momentous occasion for the world as well as for the United States. Both because of the significance of his background, but also I think just they brought a completely different, a new vibe to that sort of office, and I think in the way that countries at that time were developing and managing relationships with each other, and I think in a way, it's a pity the US don't have 3 terms, because almost you learn in the first term, you consolidate in the second term, and then you could probably sort of press the accelerator button on a few things by the time you get to the third term, and maybe he would have probably, I think, achieved more with another sort of run, but. I think they're the couple of the moment for me, and she's definitely the woman of the moment and the person of the moment that I really, really like the look of. Good one. Another one to add to the tally. We're going to be you have to put this league table out at some point. So
I don't know if it's as the Obamas. They might have 2 points now.
They might. Liz, thank you ever so much for joining us today on the Global Guys. What a fascinating episode. For those of you that are listening, watching across all our platforms on Apple, Spotify, LinkedIn, YouTube, Liz's details will be branded about, and so you can contact her for various questions you would like to ask with everything that she has mentioned today. Again, what a great episode, and in Global Guys tradition, thank you ever so much from one half of the Global Guys for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Global Guys.